Sean spent most of his childhood with his dad and granddad, building all kinds of inventions and fixing things in the shop. Sean has built a couple of Airstream cigar lounges, a mobile stage truck, several youth centers, a retail men's store, restored several hot rods, and is a current Guinness World Record holder. He's also a furniture maker, event producer, and DJ, all things he accomplished after his 9-to-5 job. The heart of American Grindstone has come from Sean's ever-creating mind. Today we sit down with Sean to learn about what makes a doer and find inspiration for our own journey ahead.
The Grindstone.
My sonny boy kept his nose to the grindstone.
Never give up, never surrender.
Hey Sean, how you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's nice to be on my own podcast.
I know, right? Sitting down with you, I was like, well, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
And easy.
Easy.
No.
Easy.
We just hanging, baby.
That's right.
Hanging like our good friend Hillary over there.
Mm-hmm.
The Hillary was the name, correct?
Hillary.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. All right, so I wanted to know, and we've known each other for a while now, on and off, but never really hung out as much as we've been hanging out lately.
We've been casually dating.
We haven't, we've casually dated. I'd see you around the skating rink, and, wonder, But you do so much. I've always known about your entrepreneurial ways, if you will, your Jedi ways. And I've always kind of wanted to sit down and have this type of interview with you. We've had it a little bit before, but not so, where I can ask the hard-hitting questions.
It's good.
So in terms of being a doer, who is Sean Taylor?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think often about, what kind of drives me, and it's definitely curiosity and passion. Right? I'm always wanting to learn new things, make things, restore things. I like taking what is discarded and repurposing it or making it beautiful. And so I'm always just driven by that. I have an old family piano, and I'm getting ready to mill it and build it into a bed because I didn't want to throw the piano out. It's been in my family for 3 generations, and it's trash, but the wood is really good. And it holds a lot of significance. And I grew up playing that piano. I grew up playing music around it with my guitar and my family and friends. And so I thought, well, let's make this into something useful. And I need a bed right now. So I figured, why not build a bed?
So that also came out of necessity as well?
Necessity, passion, and curiosity.
That was my next question. We're like, why a bed? And you're like,
Yeah.
because I need one, right?
I need a bed.
I need one desperately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man, that's great. For me, like when I think about entrepreneurs, like I always think like these guys got to figure it out. You go into Shark Tank, or you like just seeing the sharks themselves, or just seeing all these people that do all these business ventures, whether it's making something that's already been created better or creating something all, by themselves. What, this is going to sound weird, but what gives you the right to be bold? Where do you allow yourself to go for it, man?
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, I've always liked building stuff. I remember I got a job at a cabinet shop, and the first summer I worked there, I tried to build a cabinet, even though all I was doing at the shop that summer was sanding. I was the only male sander at this custom cabinet shop. And I tried to build my own cabinet, and it was super whack. I didn't want anybody to see it, and I swore I would never build a cabinet again. Yeah. And then by the end of the summer, I had built some beautiful furniture. That's crazy. Just by learning how to make a simple box. Yeah. And I remember, my dad just giving me permission, son, you're going to go and you're going to learn how to build a box. It's one of the most basic things you can learn, but you're going to be able to do so much with it. And by giving me that permission, it just kind of opened my mind to back then I built a bed and nightstands using the cabinet shop as kind of a place for me to learn. Yeah. And I didn't just sand on my breaks. I walked around to the other stations, and I wanted to learn what different kinds of things people were doing in those stations, and I wanted to see it, and I wanted to get my hands on it, and so that's always driven me. Early in the early 2000s, a friend of mine and we were buying cars at an auction and flipping them to sell. And I remember we bought this one car, and the engine was bad, and it was a Toyota 4Runner, and he just started ripping the engine out of this car and called me over one night and said, "Hey, could you come give me a hand?" And I went over, and I was like, "How do you know how to do this?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't." And I thought, wait, what? He says, "Well, I just pull off each piece, and I label it, and I label the spot I took it from, and I just pull them apart, and I'm going to just pull this engine out. I'm going to put another one in. I'm going to put everything right back where I got it. And to me, it was a turning point. It was a pivot in my life where I went, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
you don't have to know everything to just start doing it. And ever since that day, I felt like there's nothing that I can't do. And it's not because I'm talented or because I'm really good. I'm just willing to give it a shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think I'm not a good entrepreneur in the sense of like I haven't made millions of dollars. I haven't even made tens of thousands of dollars entrepreneuring, right? But I've enjoyed everything I've done.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the thing. That's the heart of what we want to do with this podcast. But it's just my heart.
Yeah.
I want to learn from people. I want to build. I want to grow. And I want to try things that are scary and maybe other people don't want to do.
Yeah. It's so, you put up a good point of like giving yourself permission to do that. Like your friend who in a day before all of, YouTube and the internet and everything else where you could just like, some dude's going to show you how to do it.
Yep.
He was just figuring it out and labeling it all, but he gave himself permission to fail.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny because now we have YouTube, right, where we can go learn that stuff. But I didn't have that growing up. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and I went over to my granddad's shop, and he was always repairing lawnmowers, and so I learned how to work on lawnmower engines. And my dad wouldn't let me have a four-wheeler, so my granddad would give me a lawnmower, and I learned how to make lawnmowers go faster. and I always blow the engines, and then I had to take the engine off and
Too far.
Yeah, always too far.
Yeah.
But I got to sit with my granddad. I got to sit with my dad. I got to learn those things. I got my first car when I was 14, and spent a year and a half restoring it.
Jeez.
And I'm 14. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And my dad didn't know everything, and my granddad didn't know everything, and my cousin didn't know everything, but they all knew enough. And so there's different points in the process where they would jump in and teach me. Now it's funny because like my son, he just blew the head gasket in his truck this last year. And he'd saved up since he was 12 for that thing. 4 years of his life, he'd been saving to buy this truck. And I couldn't scrap the truck, right? Yeah. I have no idea how to repair a head gasket. And all my friends are super busy. And so we just YouTubed that bad boy. And it took us a while, but we did it. We rebuilt the whole thing, the whole engine from the ground up. And he's driving it today.
That's crazy.
That's
crazy.
Because you're not afraid to take a risk.
Well, and it's like that generational. Like your dad gave you permission. Here's a box, make a box, right? Or your grandfather, when you guys are working on cars, like bringing you along. And it's the same for your son, right? So it's like generationally giving that permission to be like, it's okay to fail. It's okay to succeed.
Yeah.
Even better so.
And you don't have to know everything.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a great point.
Yeah.
You don't have to know everything.
I think the thing that keeps most people from doing the things that they love or the things that they're interested in is, I don't know how to do it, so therefore I won't do it.
Oh, for sure.
But often I'm a person that learns by getting my hands dirty and doing it. And so, okay, I don't know how to do it either, but let's figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that totally makes sense. That fear of failure, so you never jump into it. You just don't do anything because you're like, oh, if I do that, I'll probably fail. Or I don't know anything about it, right?
Yep.
Or I'm out of my depth.
Yep.
It's so much different now with that, like kind of like we've been talking about, but this age of knowledge. But even with that age of knowledge, it still doesn't bring that permission, right, to do that. So I get that.
Yeah, even doing my son's truck, like we're watching the video and it's telling you step by step on how to do it, right? But at the same time, there's so many little things.
Yeah.
And so I had this friend of mine, Lauren, who's a 70-year-old hippie ex-pastor mechanic that like would come over and
put Jesus in this.
Yeah, he would just smoke my little cigars. He would just smoke my cigars and have a beer, and he would sit there and he would listen to the engine and help us tune it. And
crazy,
so like even this day and age where I've done a bunch of engines and I've done a bunch of cars and I have YouTube, it's not always enough.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
So beyond just overcoming the fear of diving in, it's also surrounding yourself with people or going and finding people that have some knowledge in that as well.
Yeah, confidence building people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I get that.
Yeah.
For sure.
When I was in college, the transmission went out in my car, and I had some friends that had a house, and so I brought my car over. I pushed my car across the street and brought it to their house, and I had to
fixing this.
Yeah, I didn't have any tools.
Yeah.
I didn't have any knowledge. It was a front wheel drive car too. So I went to a transmission shop and I said, "Hey, I need to do this," and they said, "Go get the Chilton manual, about this book, because there's no YouTube yet, right? And go get the Chilton manual, follow the step by step, and then bring us the transmission. We'll fix it, but you'll save yourself a bunch of money." So I did. It took me like 3 months.
Jeez.
Because I'm under that car and I'm taking things apart, but oops, I took the wrong thing off. I better put that back up. Oh, I took, and I'm in the winter. It's cold out there, right?
Yeah.
I'm freezing. I've got very minimal tools, right?
Yeah.
It's whatever I got at the used tool store. And then when I pulled the transmission, I took it to those guys and I said, okay. And I had them show me how to fix it. And they fixed it.
Yeah.
I got to watch, and then I brought it back and I put it back in and drove my car out, a little while later.
Yeah. It's that kind of same thing where it's at the furniture shop, right? You're going station to station watching these guys.
Yep.
Then at the mechanic shop, you're watching these guys.
Yep.
Yeah. That's being proactive in your life to be able to do the things that are out of necessity, or just like wanting to just build that knowledge in your head to have forever.
Yep.
You don't see a lot of that these days.
My dad, the line that my dad always used, and it was usually like more in a threatening manner, but he always said, "Don't let fear or common sense hold you back."
Oh, I love that.
And so that was usually if I was being kind of a smart aleck to my dad, and I knew I was pushing it, he'd see like, "Son, don't let fear or common sense hold you back." But the reality is that still plays throughout my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And it rings through your head.
Yep.
Whether you wanted it to with that or not. But now you're like,
Exactly.
gosh, he was right.
Yep.
That's awesome.
I can hear that deep guttural John Taylor voice in my head, like, "Don't let fear or common sense hold you back." Okay, let's go.
Your dad's name is John Taylor?
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love that. John and Sean?
John and Sean.
All the time.
Yep.
What was your grandfather's name?
John.
John as well. So
Yeah.
John Sr., John Jr.?
Yeah, he went by Harry.
He went by Harry?
Yeah, he didn't even know his name was John until he got into the Army, and they gave him his, in World War II, and they gave him his stuff, and it had JAHT, and he said, "Who is this? I'm Harry Taylor." And they're like, "Well, your given name is John." Yeah, here's your dog tags, by the way.
That's what the military does. First, they bring me in, then they change my name. No, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
How wild
Yeah,
is that?
it's crazy.
That's crazy. So it's something that his parents called him that, kind of like a nickname.
Yeah, and all the Taylor men in my family have the middle name Aaron from
Gotcha.
my great uncle, and it's
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah.
Wild, man. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that kind of traditions. Learn a little bit about you. So building cars, DJing, woodworking are very different disciplines, for sure.
Sure.
Absolutely. How did you become proficient in all these different crafts?
Yeah, it's a lot of different things like we've been talking about. I mean,
sure.
It's a willingness to learn,
Yeah.
right? Years ago, like with the DJ thing, like I DJ'd in high school with the dual CD players, and I tried my hand at radio DJing for a while in college, and after college, my first job out of college was a radio DJ. So I started to learn how to mix music and talk over it and stuff, and I thought it'd be really fun. But it was like in 2010, I signed my kids up to go to this little Christian school, and I needed to find a way to pay for it because I couldn't afford the $16,000 a year to send 4 kids to this school. Dang. And this guy came to me at a coffee shop and said, "Hey, somebody gave me your name and said you'd be really great to DJ my daughter's quinceañera." And I was like, I don't do that anymore. And he's like, "Well, what if I paid you up front?" And I said, "Okay."
Yeah.
And so he paid me up $500 up front. I bought a tiny little mixer. I downloaded some software. I bought a bunch of lights because it needed to be a party.
Yeah.
And then I started going around to churches because they had a bunch of broken gear in it. If there's one thing I learned from all the years I was working in churches is they always have broken gear in the back. And so I'd bring the speakers home and I'd take them apart and I'd figure out what was wrong with them.
Oh, no way.
And then I'd fix them. So I built this whole sound system out of old speakers.
Yeah.
And I DJ'd this party. And the same weekend, that guy got another gig for me that same weekend at the same venue. So I DJ'd 2 parties. And then the word got out that I was pretty fun.
Yeah.
And so I started DJing more. And I started developing the craft. I started learning about mixing music and beat matching. And I started learning how to scratch, and I'm not that good. And but I just started doing those kind of things, and I made myself a student of sound.
Yeah.
and I just dove in.
That's crazy.
And, at one point I had a 20-foot trailer and 5 sound systems and video screens and the whole thing. And, was doing really big events and all this kind of stuff all the time. But it all came out of the fact that I was just willing to kind of jump in and make do with what I had.
Yeah. Yeah. And learn more and more as you went along.
Exactly. It's funny because years later, that guy hired me back for his daughter's college graduation or something. No, his daughter's wedding.
Full circle.
It was full circle. And at this point, I had a trailer and I had all this gear and I had all this stuff.
Name.
Yeah. And I was like, my business is called the Beat Farm.
Oh, I love it.
And
I love it.
Yeah. And I told this guy, like, this is all because you gave me $500 and asked me to DJ your daughter's quinceañera. Like, I couldn't believe it, right?
That's crazy.
So it's neat, man.
He's like, you got much better.
Yeah, totally.
Your setup is crazy.
So I think in all of those things, like, I'm interested in woodworking. I want to learn how to, but I don't want to just like nail some stuff together. I want to learn how to how wood grain works. And I learned that when I was standing at the cabinet shop. I learned about wood grain, and I want to learn how to mill. I want to mill my own wood. I want to start with the bark on the side of it, and I want to cut it, make my own boards.
Old school. I love that. I just picture you out there, like a shipyard. Just
it was more a big machine that you feed it through. But yes.
I like how I went so far back. Like he's in a wife beater, just going for it. Yeah,
with straw hanging out of his mouth.
Yeah.
I'm not that old, but I love. I want to learn as much as I can, and curiosity continues to drive me. So, with a car, with DJing, with whatever, it's just being willing to put yourself out there and give it a shot.
I love that. I love that, man.
Yeah.
Now I've been to the Tin Can, your cigar lounge that you made out of an Airstream before, and this thing is so incredibly impressive. Anyone that knows about it or has been to it that's listening to this podcast knows it is absolutely gorgeous. Where does something like that come from? I got to know the story of that, is what it is essentially.
Yeah, so I've been smoking cigars for like 25 years, right? But when I started traveling for a job at this company called Faith Life, and I was a conference speaker. And so I'd go to 40 cities a year, and I'd speak at conferences. Well, when you're on the road that much, you can kind of find yourself in a rut. And I just didn't want to hang out in a bar. I didn't want to hang out in my hotel room. I wanted to experience these cities. So I studied food in those cities that I'd go to and want to learn about the restaurants. But I also wanted a place to kind of decompress. And I found cigar lounges. Now, up here in Washington, that's not really a thing.
No, I hadn't heard of it before you, truly.
So I'm going to these cities, and I'm finding cigar lounges, and it's a common thing throughout cities.
Yeah.
And they were beautiful, and they were fun, and they were lively. And, I'd be in Cleveland playing dominoes, and I'm the only white guy in the place. And then I'm in Frisco, Texas, and I'm walking into a bank vault converted into a humidor, and I'm seeing really rare old cigars. And you're going to these places and seeing these really cool things. And then I would come home on rainy Washington nights, and I'd freeze my butt off in the shop next to a heater, and I'd have my buddies over, and we'd all be sitting there like this.
You won't believe of this vault that I was in. Yeah, sure, Sean.
And it totally took away from like the luxury experience that I had begun to enjoy.
That makes total sense.
And so I bring idea books with me everywhere. I have them on my backpack. So I write on my phone sometimes, but I try not to write on my phone because I find myself getting distracted and diluted.
Yeah, I get that.
But I have these idea books, and I'm always just writing down things I want to make. And so that and Pinterest. I live on Pinterest, right?
Me too.
Yeah,
I truly do.
Yeah, man.
Like from face makeup to like any woodworking project.
Okay, well, I've never done makeup.
It's more like transforming my kid's face into like an animal.
Oh, got it.
That's also
it's not like an eyeshadow.
Yeah, I guess I should have clarified in the very beginning.
Yeah, it's not like
Thank you.
It's not like male rouge or something.
Thanks for not letting me leave this podcast.
Yeah, okay.
Clarifying that.
I wanted to make sure.
But anyways, Pinterest.
Yeah, so I have a board on there called Things I Want to Make, and it was funny. I reviewed it about a year ago or 6 months ago, and I was like, man, I've made 60% of the things on this list.
Oh, that's great.
Because I have these idea books. So when I was traveling, I started looking at Washington state laws, and I found like, in Washington state, you can't have a public smoking venue, like a cigar lounge.
Oh, yeah.
But then I found, but you can have a members only. But in Washington, you can't have any employees. in a place. So how do I have an employee-less, members-only place?
Yeah.
And it can't be a building attached to another building. So how do I do that? And
Oh man,
so I started.
didn't even know that back. You
Yeah.
really did the whole runaround.
Oh, I
for that.
started just like, you go on the Google rabbit trails, right?
For
And you start
sure.
studying the laws. And I'm no lawyer. In fact, I skim read everything.
Yeah.
But I'm reading it and I'm going, how can I build something that would maybe benefit other people too? Because
Yeah.
I had a couple of houses where I'd built like a cigar room.
Sure.
But in this season, I didn't have a cigar room I could build. And so I started thinking, well, what could I do? And I love restoration.
Yeah.
So I thought, what if I went and got an old Airstream and I gutted it and I put a cigar lounge in it? So I got my idea book out and I just drew a little quick sketch
Yeah.
of what it could look like. I came back. I ran into a friend of mine, Corey. I showed him what I was thinking of. And he's like, dude, I have an Airstream sitting in my yard. Like my brother-in-law and I were going to do a Airbnb and he kind of backed out. And so I don't know what to do with this thing now. And he's like, my wife wants it out of the driveway. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went over.
Best case scenario.
Yeah. So I went over and hooked my truck up to it. And I said, okay, well, here's the deal. We're not going to go in debt over this. And so I brought it home and it sat for a while. But when I was traveling, I was meeting artists and entertainers and people in the green room at these conventions and conferences I was speaking at. And I met this great guy, and we were talking about side hustles, and I showed him the stage truck that I had built, and I said, it's attached to my newly acquired Airstream, and I said, I'm thinking about turning this into a mobile cigar lounge. And he goes, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I went down and spoke, and then I came back up, and he turned his laptop around, and he goes, here's how I can be your business partner.
No.
And so I came home, I wrote up I learned how to write an LLC.
Yeah.
I learned how to write partnership agreements. I
That's wild. That's
researched
wild.
all that kind of stuff. I got our tobacco license and all that. Once I got that all in place, I sent it to him. He signed and sent me a check, and it was enough money to build the first trailer. And so now I had the cash.
Yeah.
So I got the trailer.
Yeah.
I know how to take stuff apart really good. So
yeah. Demo is the best.
yeah,
right?
it was a perfectly nice trailer.
Yeah.
It was all original. I gutted it, and then what I did is what I like to do all the time is I set up a chair in the corner, a little ashtray, and I just spent a couple weeks sitting there enjoying a cigar and envisioning the space.
Yeah.
And once I started doing that, it's funny, the first purchase I made was the trailer is called an Avion, and the model is an Argonaut. I love history. And so the Argonauts were the sailors that went with Jason to search for the Golden Fleece in Greek lore.
Yes.
It's like the first ship in Greek lore.
Yeah.
And so I knew when I was designing the trailer in my head and in my sketch pad was I wanted to use period correct metals. So I don't want to use steel or chrome or,
Gotcha.
I don't want silver. I want bronze and coppers and things like that.
Yeah.
So the first thing I bought with all this money was a little statue of Hector and a little statue of Achilles in combat.
Oh, that's so great.
And my business partner Corey, whose trailer I'm renovating, looks at me and is like, "What the heck are you doing?" And I was like,
Is the first purchase?
"Bro, this is inspiration." And I knew where I was going to put them, and I stuck them up right where I was going to put them, and they're there to this day.
Yeah.
And I started going to town.
Dude, that's crazy to use idiot inspiration, but also like to keep yourself in that moment. That's what I was hearing from the kind of tail end of that story, to like, I'm going to sit in this space for 2 weeks, really just like pour myself into this space, have these ideas, but also to keep yourself on your trips and your travels, to keep thinking about it and adding new things, knowing what metals I want to use. You were really involved in that kind of, you kept yourself mentally in that space.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
And it was neat because, like, there's a spot where there's all the rivets on the front of the trailer.
Yeah.
Inside. And I drilled all those out, and I replaced them with copper rivets.
Oh, it's so
right?
crazy.
Because I'm like, I don't want chrome rivets there. I don't want painted rivets. I want copper.
Keep the hole, replace the rivet.
Exactly.
That's genius. That reminds me of like The Aviator with DiCaprio, just like, needs more rivets. Where he's like OCD about the rivets on the side of the plate.
Yeah.
Brass rivets.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about that,
copper.
right? And I brought my buddy, I didn't know how to, like, I wanted comfortable seats.
Yeah.
And it'd be easy to make just a 90-degree bench.
Sure.
But I was like, no, I want comfortable seats. And so I talked to my buddy who's a framer, and I said, hey, I want to build these seats. And so we just did the work together. We researched like the most comfortable seats for these BMW seats in a car. So we like looked at the slope of the seats.
Like the angle of that?
Yeah, all the angles. And then we framed it to fit that angle so it would maximize. So your legs aren't 90, but your legs are slightly slightly up, and your knees are down. And I didn't know anything about upholstery, so I bought a bunch of chairs off Amazon and I threw the frames away and I used the cushions, the leather cushions for the seating.
I didn't know that you went that far into the detail of it. I had no clue.
Every detail, every part of that trailer was planned and thought about, and oftentimes we'd try something, it didn't work, and we'd try something else, and I had this huge cachet of wood. I was the 5th generation in the same house growing up, and there was this walnut tree that my dad played under as a kid, and it blew down in 1962, and my granddad cut it into logs because we were a logging family back then, and then my dad, who's a woodworker, cut it into slabs. And those sat in his shop for decades. And then I took those slabs and I milled them down, and I built the countertop. I built all of the armrests. I built the back piece where Hector and Achilles are in battle. There's kind of a big
piece. That's all from that tree?
Yeah. And I have so much of that wood. I built a desk out of it. I've built a bunch of stuff out of it over the years. But I wanted the trailer to tell a story, and I wanted everywhere you sit to see something that resonates with you, right?
I just didn't realize there was so much of your DNA in that.
Yeah.
Like, truly. It shows.
And I bled a lot, so there's literally my DNA in
there. Well, like, black light that place, it is everywhere.
There's blood everywhere. My dad always said, if you're not bleeding, you're not working hard enough.
Is that for real? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a curse upon my family because I bleed at every project. I bleed all over it. So.
Well, that brings me into my next question of, like, something like that where you're saying, like, we would try something, it wouldn't work, and try something, it wouldn't work until you got it right. Like, what keeps you from burnout, or, like, do you burn out?
Yeah,
a couple
absolutely.
Things there.
That's a great question. I have over 1,000 hours into. I've built 2 of those trailers now, so I have over 1,000 hours into each of them. Jeez. I say it's about 1,500 hours, but 500 hours, or a couple hundred hours was smoking a cigar and watching an episode of Seinfeld or something.
Creative process.
Yeah, it's a creative process. But it was like easily 1,000 hours of just work.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm talking like my family went to bed at 10. I would go out and work until 2 a.m, and then I'd work on Saturdays, but I'd never worked on Sundays, right? Like, so like, I had to pace myself. Like, a great example of burning out would be, I knew that I wanted the walls to be slatted, like the slatted wood. Yeah. And I had a contractor buddy stop by one day just to see what I was up to, and I told him what I wanted to do, and he's like, dude, don't do that. It's so much work. It's so exhaustive. Like, it's going to take you so much time.
I mean, it's very similar to this.
Yeah.
It's thinner, though,
Yep.
I'd say. Yeah.
And I said, okay, it's probably a good idea. So I went out and bought wood grain flooring that was adhesive, and I put it on the walls. And I came back the next morning, and it all fallen off.
Oh.
So then I went and got rubber cement, and I talked to a friend. He's like, oh, yeah, if you use rubber cement, get it tacky, rubber cement the back of the stuff, and then put it on there, it'll be great. Yeah. So I did that, and I spent 2 days rubber cementing this stuff to the walls. And no joke, I came back the next morning, and it was all on the floor.
It was that rubber cement that we used in grade school. That's
why. Yeah, exactly.
We roll it into a ball.
It was the stuff we ate and sniffed.
Yeah.
And 3 times I did this. Yeah. And 3 times it fell off. Good and Lord. It never looked the way I wanted it to look. Yeah. And I gave up. I didn't come out there for weeks. I couldn't even go out there. I was so discouraged. I put all this work into it. Until finally I was like, well, I know what I wanted to do.
Yeah, from the beginning.
And I've put all of this work into this, which is now more than I probably would have put into that. So I went and got a bunch of old fir, and I planed it. I ran it through the table saw in like 1-inch strips. Yeah. I pre-drilled every hole, hand sanded every piece, stained every piece. Yes. Created a little jig, to put it and space everything evenly. And I just went to work. And it's 1,000 screws, right? It's 900 something screws. And I just went and I even found a screw that I wanted that had a finish that I wanted that had a shape of the head that I wanted, because again, I wanted the whole thing. I wanted you to get lost in the space. Yes. And so I did. And I put so many hours into that. I exhausted myself.
Oh, it shows, man.
In putting it together. But when you walk in there, it's one of the first things that people see is that the lines, right, and how it draws you in. Yeah. So
it's got that old school kind of vibe you just don't see anymore. from the outlets to every, like you said, the screws. And I didn't know you drilled all those holes. That must have taken forever.
It was forever.
Pre-drilling
Yeah,
those.
and I had my son out there, and we were passing the wood through the planer, and then we were passing the wood through the table saw,
Yeah.
and we're making all these little 1-inch by 1-inch slats, right? And then we're drilling all the holes, and
Yeah.
then we're sanding each piece, and it's a lot. I think the thing that kept me from discouragement was, one, it was accountability.
Yeah.
Like, I had somebody else's money now invested in this, and
For
I had
sure.
somebody else who gave me this trailer to work on, and now I'm sitting there. So
Yeah.
I do need to get back out there. And two, it was vision.
Mhm.
Like, I know what I want. I
Yeah.
know what this can be. I got to knuckle down and do it. And I was so unmotivated to even get started again. But then once I started going, man, I found my lane.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I have all these little rituals. Like, if I worked in the morning, I would listen to podcasts and I would listen to audiobooks. Afternoon, it was all like 90s grunge or like hip hop. Like,
Yeah.
It was all I would do. And at night, I played like a TV show in the background while I was working.
Gotcha.
So a friend of mine was in Boston, and he bought me a little hand-cut sign of the show Cheers, because I watched 2 full seasons of Cheers while I was putting those slats up.
What?
And so when you go in the trailer, there's a little Cheers.
I've seen it.
Yeah,
I have seen
cut
it.
out cut out sign, because it reminds me of that grind.
I assumed that the Airstream is just, where everybody knows your name. But
Which is also true. It's
also
small.
True, which is also true. That's what 2 full seasons.
Yeah, I had 2 full seasons of the show Cheers that just played in the background.
Yeah.
I would never watch something that I would be engaged in or engrossed in. It was always usually a sitcom and an old one that I had seen a million times.
Yeah.
And I could just zone out and go to work, right?
And now it triggers you.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, when you hear the song. No.
So yeah, the motivation came from accountability. The motivation came from having a vision, and the motivation came through routine.
Yeah.
Like, I gotta have routines, things going on
Yeah.
that can help me kind of focus in this moment.
That is such a great point that you bring up, because that's like something I think like humans in general realize, where it's like kind of when you're down and out or just complacent, that becomes your routine, to be complacent.
Yes.
And talking on a podcast of, how do we become doers? Once you just start setting these goals for yourself, like, hey, I'm going to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, and I'm going to wake up at 6 in the morning, and even on weekends, that becomes a routine.
Yes.
Right? So when you're working, like, it's almost like you have recorrected your mind.
Yeah.
Not that I'm sure you were already doing stuff before.
Well,
but
and I'm prone to anxiety and depression, right? Like,
Yeah.
I feel those things real big. And so I remember not, going out at 10 o'clock at night when everybody else is going to bed.
yeah,
I'm a night person, but it took a lot.
for sure.
And because there's nobody there going, hey, you need to get back to work, you're having to kind of get to an internal dialogue where you're like, okay, just get up and go do it.
Yeah.
Just one day.
Yeah.
Just go do this one day. Go just start playing in the wood. Now
Yeah.
just start cutting the wood. And some days you just really had to talk yourself into it to
Yeah.
push through.
To simplify it for yourself, where it's like, just tonight, get out there tonight.
Yep.
They're all in bed anyways. Oh man, that's really
Put
smart.
something on that is refreshing and encouraging for you. You
Yeah.
know, that's why. Like, in the morning, my brain's always sharp. And so podcasts and audiobooks, I'm really like tuned in. In the afternoon,
Yeah.
I kind of want to zone out a little bit, right?
For sure.
So I'm just going to put music on I can sing along or rap along to, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then at
you know
night,
it.
like, I want to just kind of laugh. I need some humor. So I'm going to put that stuff on while I'm going, and it's just background noise for me, right?
Yeah. It's like staying lifted.
But it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I dig that. For me personally, like my whole part of this, this in the podcast, is like, I want to be more of a doer.
Mhm.
So truly, like hearing these things is actually super helpful for me, because it's like I am someone that does get a bit complacent. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's almost like I don't even realize I'm doing the routine, and the routine is just happening to me, right?
Yes.
But it's like, no, you get up, you make a choice in your life, and it's your choice if you do anything at all.
Yep.
Right? So I love that. I
Well,
love
and I
these
think-
little tricks that you're...
I think the idea is like we all have jobs that we have to do, and
Yeah.
oftentimes in my life I've had jobs that I didn't like.
Yeah.
Most of my life I've had jobs that I've really enjoyed, but I've had jobs where I didn't like that job.
Yeah.
And so to come home from that job and then to feel like you want to go do something else is exhausting. Like, it's just easier to turn on the TV and watch other people do something.
Oh, for sure.
But the heart, my own heart, and I think the heart of what we're trying to build here
Mhm.
is, no, like, that's a routine you could break out of.
Yeah.
And you don't have to know everything. It's just about being curious. It's about following a passion and diving in. And next thing you know, you might end up with some really cool stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And something to show for it too.
Yeah.
You know.
American Grindstone is brought to you by Travax, the ultimate gear for the modern adventurer. Whether you're hitting the trails, exploring the city, or just navigating everyday life, Travax has you covered. Here is the Contour. It's my own personal everyday carry. The Contour is Travax's sleek and durable wallet that is designed to be your EDC companion. Made from top grain leather and precision engineered metal, the Contour not only looks great, but is built to withstand whatever life throws at you. But that's not all. Travax also offers a wide range of rugged belts, their skeletonized field knife, and the ever-popular OG 2.0, as well as other essentials that blend form and function seamlessly. Elevate your everyday carry with Travax, where style meets durability. Travax, earn your story.
One thing I'm just like really curious about is like, has there ever been something, a failure happened where at first you really were like, man, this is catastrophic, or just like, I can't, this is wild that this is happening, but then ended up being a blessing or learning from something huge? An example of that, if you have that.
Yeah, you know, lots of failure.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I have a photo album on my phone. I try to make albums to like organize my photos, so I'm not that guy that's like, oh, let me show you, it's right here. You know, I don't want to be that guy.
I'm that guy.
Yeah.
I'm still that guy.
So I try to move things into albums and stuff, and so I have one called Failed Attempts.
Yeah.
And it's stuff that I've failed at.
It's genius.
Yeah. And I want to remind myself of those things.
Yeah.
One was the youth center. I was given a building with a mini golf course in it and the whole nine, and I worked with a top-notch design team to create. I had all these really great resources, and I needed to raise money for it, and I didn't raise money for it.
Oh, wow.
I just couldn't get the money. I couldn't get the momentum.
Yeah.
And at one point, you just have to go, okay, I'm just not gonna do that. And I felt like a huge failure because I had tried to raise money, and we were trying to raise like $60,000, and we'd raised, I don't know, 15, 20.
Yeah.
But I could just tell it wasn't. You can just tell sometimes with an idea it's just not going to go.
Yeah.
And so I bounced on it, but next thing I know, it became a community center for a big missions organization called YWAM, and
no way.
And that to this day, kids from all over the world come and use this space to learn how to serve in their community.
Oh, it's amazing.
And
I love
so,
YWAM.
yeah, so failed attempt, turned into community blessing. Absolutely. Yeah. And I would say every job, every project, every idea, every whatever is always on the verge of failing.
Yeah.
Every one of them. Like the trailer, that's a great example. Like I was ready to give up.
Yeah.
And I was ready to scrap it.
And you're like, I'm just going to walk away for a minute. Yeah.
Which is kind of funny because like the best deals when you're buying old Airstream trailers is to go find somebody on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or whatever, or on eBay, who had an idea, tried to do the idea, was overwhelmed by the idea, and they got to get rid of the idea.
Total sense.
Right?
That makes total sense. I even think about that.
Yeah, I see people that list Airstreams for $20,000, right? And they're nothing, and I'm going, no way.
Yeah.
You see the same one, if not better, for like $5,000. Like I found one today that was $5,000 here in Bellingham.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, I just got to get this out of my driveway. I tried to turn it into a tiny home, and I couldn't do it. And I've listed it to sell for super cheap. And I'm like, I want to buy that right now.
Yeah.
Because I'm like,
third time's the charm.
Yeah, because that was the deal. Like some people's failure is another person's success.
Yeah.
And honestly, I get it. Like 1,000 hours, tens of thousands of dollars to try something that you're not sure is going to work or not.
Yeah.
And the level of discouragement and like fortuitiveness that like you have to get through it.
Yeah.
It can make a lot of people just want to quit.
Well, and then they want to recoup at least any chunk of that they can.
Yeah.
Like, I guess $5,000. Like,
yeah.
Here it is. And there's like stuff, you could have all the stuff in it.
Yep.
Yeah,
The first car I did a serious restoration to was a 1963 Ford Fairlane. And it was my daily driver. It was the coolest car. It's the last Ford with fins.
Yeah.
It looked like a rocket ship. And I drove that car, and then I got hit by a drunk driver. Didn't have insurance, and I started to restore that car. But at the time, I'm watching all of those car restoration shows on TV, right? And my ideas are getting bigger.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm like cutting out the floor pans, and I'm like I'm learning how to weld in new floor pans. And I pulled the engine, and I'm rebuilding the whole thing now.
Yeah.
And like, all I needed to do was replace the fenders in the hood.
And then Exhibit showed up, and he's like, I'm ready to tip your ride. What are you into,
Exactly.
basketball? You could have a full court in the back. You're like, what?
Exactly it.
Totally.
I waited
totally
for
get
Exhibit
that.
or Chip Foose or somebody to show up at some point, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But the funny thing about it all was, well, not funny, is ultimately I had $20,000 into a car that didn't even start,
Yeah.
and I ended up selling it for $4,000 just to get it out of my shop.
Yeah.
It had become such a strain on my life and my relationships and everything else. I was like,
Yeah.
and so I get it. Like, sometimes discouragement can overcome, and you gotta kind of wipe the slate clean.
You got to cut your losses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it didn't stop me from giving it a shot later, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of it too has to do with like confidence and how you view yourself in this world. And so my next question would be, how do you view yourself? Like, who to yourself, who is Sean Taylor to you?
Sure. Well, I think in regards to this stuff, I'm not afraid to try.
Yes, I definitely read that.
I'm
from
not
you.
afraid to fail.
Mhm.
And if I fail, at least I'm going to learn something.
Mm.
And so I'm not a master craftsman. I'm not the best woodworker. I'm not the best car guy. I suck at diagnosing problems with cars, right? I could fix it once I figure out what's wrong with it. But if somebody else could tell me what's wrong with it, then great, right?
Yeah.
So I just have to be okay with the fact that I'm not going to be all these things, but it's an opportunity to learn, grow, or try something.
Yeah.
And I have a very short memory, right? So, oh my gosh, 1,000 hours into that trailer. It's miserable. It was a ton of work, but now it's a ton of fun.
Yeah.
And 2 years later, let's do another one.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we did,
and
right? Yeah. And then you get in there and you're like, what have I done with my life?
Yeah.
You know?
But it's, I mean, Micah, you know, you probably feel the same way as me, but it's like, you are one of those people, and I told my wife when we first started hanging out more regularly, I was like, this guy says what he means and means what he says. He actually does the things that he tells you he's going to do. Or, you know, I find that that's more rare in this world, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. It's a one of those kind of a shooting star person. I know that that's really cheesy.
Sure.
I'm a dad. Hey, you know, really cheesy, but it's true. Like, you're like, hey, I'm going to do this, and I'm of the blood. I'm like, I'll wait till I see. I'll get excited when it's happening, right? Kind of thing. But you, time and time again, you were right on. The way you view yourself is what you're putting out there.
Yeah. Cool. Well, good, man.
Yeah, a little compliment,
Yeah,
but it's so
thanks.
true. It's rare. It's
Yeah.
rare to find in these worlds. I mean, that's why we're doing a whole podcast about this.
Yeah.
You know, and changing hearts of people.
Yeah, you know, two conversations kind of led to this podcast idea, which has been in my idea book for about 4 or 5 years, maybe longer.
Again, another.
Yeah, like when I got the trailer, my friend Tim was starting an online cigar retail business called Cigars Daily.
Yeah.
And he was launching it with a YouTube channel and the whole nine. And I went to him for advice. I said, hey, I got this Airstream. I'm going to turn it into a cigar lounge. Can you give me some advice? And Tim said to me, get your tobacco license and all your stuff set up. When you get the paperwork done, give me a holler and we'll hang out.
Oh, that's so smart.
So 3 weeks later, I sent him pictures of the paperwork. And next time I was in Arizona, I stopped in and we spent a couple hours together. And I still have all the notes from when we talked.
Yeah.
Because he said, man, in like the 7+ years I've been doing this, people ask me all the time how to do this kind of business. He goes, and I tell him the same thing. Go get a license. Go get your tobacco's license. Just go get that. And he goes, you're the second person in all these years to do that. Come back to me.
It's totally.
He's like, nobody does this stuff. And so for me, that was a confidence booster.
Yeah.
And then when COVID hit and I'm working on the second trailer after I went from being a conference speaker to a phone salesman, right, for this company because there's no more conferences.
Yeah.
And my boss came out to have lunch with me one day, and we sat in the half-built trailer, and I had the other one at my place because I was refurbishing some of the stuff in it. And he's like, do you ever think about just going back and talking to your middle school self and being like, man, don't worry, dude, you're going to be a badass someday.
Yeah.
And I thought that's funny because that's not a I would never say that that's what I am.
Sure.
But like talking to this guy who's been around for a while to see like, oh, this is really unique what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Like again, that's a pivotal moment. That's the day I started writing about the podcast stuff.
Yeah.
Because I thought there's other people like that. I know a lot of them.
Yeah.
I should start talking about this stuff. But that was 4 years ago now, or 3.5, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
When that really started to take shape. And now here we are, right?
Yeah.
In a studio that I worked for 2 months on, and
Well,
you know,
it's the same thing I was saying before. It's like you put it out there, you put it in your journal or what have you. You just like, even that guy who saw that in you and was like, just wouldn't you tell yourself you're gonna be a badass, right? It's like, it's true though. I mean, like, not everyone does this. And when we were working at, doing the fair together, doing the events and everything there, you said you were going to have a podcast, and I went, oh, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, okay, like, we'll see, but it's like, I don't know. I think if you put things out in the universe, like, good things are going to happen. And if you put them in a journal and you think about them and you put yourself in that environment and start making those schedules, the things that we're talking about here, there's at least a better chance you're going to do something with your life, or at least live your dream.
Yeah, there's a study, I want to say it was Stanford. It was over a decade ago, and they found that anything you write down, you're 42% more likely to accomplish that thing. And I thought, those are pretty good odds.
Yeah.
So I keep idea books, and I just start writing stuff down. And I find that when I go back and look in those books, I'm like, oh, I forgot about, well, I was kind of building that idea a little bit. But
you expand them sometimes?
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So many of the things that I've built over the years and done or whatever, all comes out of, I just wrote it down.
Yeah.
It's one thing to talk to somebody about it. It's another thing to like write it down. It was funny when we have 2 cigar lounge trailers, and then we opened a retail store this last year, my business partner, Corey, and I. And a couple weeks into opening, this guy came into the store, and he was all like surly and angry looking. And Corey, I wasn't there, but Corey could read it on this guy.
Yeah.
And, Corey's a good dude, right? So he just walks over and he's like, hey, is something wrong? Can I help you? And the guy's like, yeah, you stole my idea. And Corey's like, oh, okay. And Corey's like, what was your idea? And the guy said, I had this idea to like do a cigar lounge in a trailer, 2.5 years ago, but you guys stole it. And Corey's like, oh. He's like, well, I mean, my business partner built it 5 years ago. But then Corey says to the guy, well, did you build one?
Yeah.
Well, no. And Corey's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, it's just an idea I had. And Corey's like, oh, like, did you write it down? No. And so, oh, it's just an idea. Well,
y'all are mind readers.
Yeah.
Oh,
we just read it.
Yeah.
We just read it out there, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is a lot of people have really good ideas.
All the time.
But not a lot of people capitalize on those good ideas.
Exactly.
And really, this thing that's so sad to me, and this is why I love talking about this kind of stuff, is if only you just tried.
Exactly.
If you just got, I'm just going to write this out a little bit more, or I'm just going to go play. I'm just going to go build, or I'm going to go do, right? Or I want to climb a mountain. Well, start with hiking, right?
Yeah.
I want to race cars. Well, maybe just learn how to drive a car responsibly. Like, you know what I mean? But like, there's a lot of baby steps that get you to getting the bigger things. And yet we live in such a world where like I can point and click and get what I want in so many instances. But really like the hustle, the grind, the grit, whatever we call it, like it's gotta just come from being faithful with little things and then letting those things build over time.
And then with that is that guy that comes in, that's a story that everyone has that experience of being like, oh man, I saw it on Instagram, I thought of something similar to that. But like just what you're saying, with a high percent chance of actually kind of doing something about it. If you maybe work it out a little bit, workshop it, talk to your wife, talk to your husband about that.
Yep.
Come up with these ideas where you can maybe possibly get a better chance of follow through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I had this sketchbook.
Yeah.
The first person I showed it to was Corey, who I had no idea had a trailer sitting in his backyard.
Yeah.
And then I showed it to a bunch of other people and nothing came of it.
Yeah.
And a couple months later, I showed it to one guy. After the event, we all went out for cigars and dinner. Next thing you know, I have a check.
Yeah.
And I'm doing the thing.
Yeah, because you're out there, you're actively talking about it, you're actively pursuing a dream of yours. I love that.
And that business,
love that stuff.
that first tin can has been operating for 5 years now.
Yeah.
You know,
And then one in Montana, correct? Is it Montana?
we have one in Bozeman as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's been 3 years now?
About 3 years
Yeah.
almost. And that one's
Crazy.
exploded.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So they're moving out of the trailer into brick and mortar. They're doing 2 different lounges.
Whoa.
And I'll be getting because I own all the trailers. I just lease them.
Yeah.
So I'll get that trailer back next summer.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
And so we have the Argonaut, and then does that one have a name?
It goes by the Timberline. That's what he wants to call it. I built it for Montana, so it's very like Wild West inspired.
Gotcha.
Like the walls are stainless steel. There's like guns and sabers and like beautiful Native American sculptures.
I
And
love that.
other things because I wanted to kind of capture this Western idea.
Yeah.
Also wanted to build LED light walls, so I experimented with, how to make a light wall out of LEDs.
So not only do you do something twice, you don't do it the same at all.
No,
I love that response too. You're
Yeah.
like, well, why the heck would I?
why?
I love
You know, the neat thing is building the first one was a ton of work. Building
Yeah.
the second one was more work, but it wasn't the same.
Yeah.
Because I'd already done one.
Yeah.
So like if you go to that one, you look like, oh, the benches in the middle are the same.
Yeah.
But I put a table and like I built a restaurant booth on one end essentially.
Oh, cool.
And on the other end, I got a beautiful Corinthian leather couch.
Interesting.
And so I changed the seating up a little bit because I thought, well, not everybody wants the kind of the rigid seats, which are really comfortable and really fun.
Yeah.
They all have their own ashtray. They've got cup holder, the whole nine. They have outlets in the seats right in the first one. But the second one, it was like, well, maybe somebody might want to lounge.
Yeah.
Or somebody wants a table.
I need to see pictures of that one
yeah.
too. I have not. So
It's beautiful. And that table's funny too because like when I was building that trailer, I wanted this table to be a centerpiece.
Mhm.
And I thought back to the slatted walls. And I thought, well, I'm just going to make a live edge table.
Yeah.
But I was like, no, I want to do like a resin table.
Did you do a resin table?
Yeah, but here's the crazy thing. I was like, I want to get a tomahawk. And I want to float the tomahawk in the resin. And so I got these big slabs of oak that
Yeah.
the Forest Service had brought down, this old growth. My friend has a sawmill. I've made a friend since the first one. And we milled these big oak slabs. And I learned how to do resin. And so I poured this first layer of resin and I heated it too fast and I put too much heat, like quick heat chemical in it, and it cracked and it looked all ugly. So then I had him come over and he's like, well, let's put a little dye in. Let's do another level and like dye it kind of black and you won't see that part.
That's crazy.
So we did it. And then I had this tomahawk, this
Yeah.
Damascus steel, beautiful tomahawk. And I'm like, I want it to look like it's floating in the middle of the resin. Well, the blade's heavy, it's not balanced, right? So we had to, like I used a cap off of like a sealant, like you would use for caulking.
Oh yeah, the little white.
Yeah, I
like,
used a
kinda cone.
cap and put it underneath there. I set the cap in the resin,
Smart.
and then I set the tomahawk on it, and then I poured slowly around it
Yeah.
so that it kept all the weight balanced. And now when you look in the table, there's this floating tomahawk and this live edge. And it took 60 hours for me to build this thing and $700 or $800 in resin,
Yeah.
right? But it's a centerpiece.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's a showstopper.
And I learned from the first one, you know what? If you have a big vision, just do it. Just do the extra work. It'll be worth it.
You can waste that time doing it all over again. 3
Exactly.
times on the ceiling. Yeah. I've always wanted to learn resin too. That sidebar, but
Super
you're gonna
fun.
Have to tell me. Yeah, you're gonna
I'll teach
have
you,
to
man.
teach me, dude.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to do stuff. Yeah.
I follow these guys on Instagram. They make tables and they get little Star Wars figurines and they like the little ships and they make tables look like Star Wars ships flying through.
That's the stuff I'm into. Me and my son look at dioramas on YouTube, and I want to make some of those dioramas. They're so
In
awesome.
resin.
In resin. They're so
Yeah.
great. All right, back to this.
Okay.
Back to you. I mean, what? Okay, so I know the podcast, we discussed this quite a bit, but what is new on the horizons for you? Not just in the podcast, which I also do want to know about,
Sure.
but also just in general for Sean Taylor.
Yeah, this is kind of a utility season for me right now. I'm doing kind of a lot of have-tos, so I'm doing some construction in the evenings right now. And it's a lot of stuff I've never done. I just framed out a big office, and I learned about sheetrock and finishing sheetrock and drywall and all this kind of stuff. I know how to frame, so I was able to frame it for the most part, but I'd never built like a full interior office. And so I'm learning those things right now. I just need to make some extra money. My hope is to build another cigar trailer. I was talking with some guys that own a gun store, and they want to convert a troop transport into a cigar lounge because they just started selling cigars in their gun store.
Wait, a troop transport, what is that?
So like in the war, when you have a bunch of guys, you had to get troops somewhere, you'd throw them in the back of these big old trucks and you'd haul them to wherever they needed to be.
That's so cool.
And so this is like a mobile command center on a truck that I would gut and turn into a lounge for this gun store that sells a ton of cigars.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
And so I'm really hoping something like that's going to turn out.
Yeah.
But honestly, for me right now, it's a lot of little projects like building the studio. I've spent the last couple months doing this kind of on the side, and I've built.
It is gorgeous, by the way.
Thank you.
Micah agrees. He's nodding. No.
And I built. I'm building a picture frame right now. I found an old mirror, and I felt like that mirror needs a frame, so I'm building a picture frame, and I want to build this bed.
Yes,
out
piano
of a
bed.
Piano, right? Like
Still playable.
yeah,
Still
I'm gonna
playable.
be able to like tickle the ivories while I'm,
You roll over onto the keys.
Exactly.
That's what wakes you up.
Yeah,
in the morning.
it's your snooze, right? Or it's your alarm.
Yeah, it's your alarm.
So yeah, it's a lot of little projects right now,
Yeah.
and just trying to find some ways to kind of make some extra income. But I'm trying to grow the cigar business. I'm trying to grow the DJ business a little bit. So I'm trying to focus and do less kind of bigger projects.
Yeah.
And a lot of little ones. But if I get this gun lounge job, I would definitely do that. It'd be really fun.
Yeah. I love that, man.
Yeah.
I've been loving all of this. This whole time's been fantastic.
Same.
Being a part of this with you. And that's again, I know I'm a broken record, but I am the guy, I am like the number one listener as far as like, this is what is inspiring me to do this. As far as like, for me, I want to be a little bit more artistic and do things that have been passion projects for me. Podcasting was one of them.
Yeah.
And the fact that you brought me on and now we're doing this, it's being a doer.
Yep.
And I am loving picking your brain every day, not just right here now, but as this goes further.
Well, I think the coolest part that I enjoy about all the doing is the community.
Yeah.
You know, I built the last trailer, and there was a lot of stuff I didn't know. I didn't know electrical. I didn't know how to work with fiberglass.
Yeah. Jeez. Yeah.
I had a friend that was really good cook, and so we catered barbecues every Thursday night at my house, and I just had a lot of trades guys come over.
Yeah.
And we'd feed them. We'd work for 2 or 3 hours, and then we'd sit and smoke cigars at the end of the night for another 2 hours.
That's brilliant.
But it was all community. It was funny because I always kind of felt bad imposing on these dudes, but when we got done, they were like, okay, when's the next one? And over like the next year,
Yeah.
one of those guys would check in and be like, hey, are you going to do another one? Like,
Yeah.
because it was just a fun thing for us to do. And
Got brisket again?
yeah, we got brisket. So that's the fun thing about doing this too. Like with you is like, this is something that it's not my thing. It's something that we get to do together.
Oh, I've been loving it.
And the thing I love the most about all the kind of stuff that I do is finding you and going, now how does this best fit Ryan?
Yeah.
Like how does Ryan be a meaningful part of this? Right.
Yeah.
The trailer was the same thing. Like, man, I got this guy, he loves sheet metal fabrication, and yet he's tired of doing siding on a building.
Yeah.
So come on over, help me figure out how to do stainless steel walls in an Airstream trailer. And it was fun for him.
Yeah.
Or
It was
like,
challenging,
it was
right?
challenging. And so all those guys, like they would come over and it was it was a fun project.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's always about finding like, how do you fit in this thing? And like, let's just let you go.
Yeah.
Right. So
I love it.
yeah.
I love every second of it, man.
That's
Your
good.
wealth of knowledge. And thank you, all of you, for watching our bromance here unfold on American Grindstone. I do appreciate it. We're over here like, I just think you're amazing. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true.
Yeah.
Well, that does it for us on this episode of American Grindstone with Sean Taylor here. Back, as usual, next week with another guest.
You know, I do want to say we have some exciting shows coming up.
Oh, yes.
And I'm really excited about what we've done here because, again, we're bringing people in with different disciplines from all walks of life.
Yeah.
And the idea is hopefully we inspire people
Oh, for sure, man.
to do things that are beyond their own comprehension. I like to say it's beyond what we can ask or imagine, right? And so, like, that's a little something from the Bible.
I love that, by
Yeah,
the way.
I'm not trying to misuse scripture, but that's I love it. Like I love.
we're
like,
open in here with
let's
this.
talk about dreaming bigger
Yeah.
than we can even imagine.
Yeah.
And so the hope is that as we bring these guests on, we have a gaming grandma who is a full-time gamer. We have a guy that's restoring a tank. We have a couple world record holders coming on the show. We've got guys that pour concrete all day, and then they build motorcycles that end up on magazine covers, and they set world records on. And like, you know, we have some really cool guests that are going to be here that are going to dial in for, I think, our viewership and our listeners, and give them just little nuggets of inspiration.
A little depth to it.
Yeah,
right?
that maybe will push you off the couch and into a space where you can start to create, build, or dream.
That's my hope, man.
Yeah.
I hope I learned from it too.
Well, when we were hanging out this summer, we were doing a concert that I was managing a bunch of concert events, and I hired Ryan to help me out with it. And when we're talking, and you're talking about, man, I love like podcasts, I love like that medium. You know, one, like the chemistry of like humor and relationship, and not that kind of chemistry. And
you, hello, camera 1, camera 2, camera 3.
but also like, well, hey, let's just do this.
Yeah.
You know, like, let's just dive in.
Yeah.
I don't want to just talk about being doers. Like, we want to make doers.
Exactly.
And as this thing grows and progresses, the dream is that we actually get to start doing stuff with people.
Yeah.
And we get to not just see how people do, but like engage our listeners into doing as well.
And we earn our story, baby.
Earn our story.
Yeah, I love it.
Earn our story.
Also, what we should do is take all of the Guinness World Records people that we have, you included with this, and then we should do a fight. And it would be the biggest fight of Guinness World Record holders in Guinness Book history.
Guinness World
Like
Record
boxing,
cage match.
Cage match edition.
Yep.
It's to the death, actually.
It's
Never
to the
mind.
death.
It's to the death.
There can only be one.
Yeah, there can only be one Guinness record.
You know what's funny? When I set my record, I found a bunch of other record holders in Whatcom County.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, there's record holders everywhere.
One of us. One of us. You're like, what?
So I've reached out to a couple of them to be on this thing. It's exciting to kind of see.
A couple of them. Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
It's going to be exciting to have them on, because to me, that's like the pinnacle of doing, right? Like, I didn't just do, but I did the biggest or the best in the world.
Yeah.
And at some point, I'll share the story about the record that I got to be a part of setting as well.
Absolutely. That's going to be next time, baby.
Yeah. So thanks for listening.
Yeah. Thank you.